Have you ever imagined what it would be like to hear the roar of war drums as longships with dragon-headed prows slice through the fog of the North Sea? The Vikings, often remembered as brutal raiders, conceal beneath their helmets a far more intricate story, one of bold conquests, surprising alliances and myths that still resonate in books and popular culture today. In this video, we will journey through the mists from the 8th to the 11th century to uncover who these navigators of ice and blood really were. What secrets did their pagan rituals hold? What truth lies behind the sagas of gods, monsters, and lost lands? Prepare to sail between reality and myth, where every battle concealed a legend, and every legend offered a glimpse into the Viking soul. When the first Viking axe was raised against the North Sea winds, European history was changed forever. The sudden, ruthless, and seemingly chaotic attacks concealed a surprising strategic logic. They were not merely raiders in search of gold, but also traders, colonizers, and incomparable navigators. To understand the Vikings, one must first decipher the world from which they emerged. The icy lands of Scandinavia, surrounded by dense forests, towering mountains, and winters that tested the endurance of any living soul. It was there, amid the harsh climate and scarcity of resources, that a people was forged whose survival depended on strength, cunning, and a deep connection with the ancient gods. The beginning of the so-called Viking Age is traditionally marked by the attack on the monastery at Lindisfarne in 793 AD. That scene became indelibly etched in the European Christian imagination. Defenseless monks massacred by leather-clad men with thick beards, roaring strange words as they looted sacred relics. But the Vikings did not emerge out of nowhere. For generations, they had been developing sophisticated ships and a culture intimately connected to the sea. Their famous longships, slender vessels with shallow drafts and multiple oars, allowed them to travel both on the open ocean and along Europe's inland rivers, granting them a mobility never before seen. They were like ghosts rising from the mist, attacking and vanishing before the cities even realized what had struck them. Despite the savage image propagated by the Christian West, the Vikings were also diplomats, explorers, and poets. In Constantinople, Nordic warriors served as elite guards for the Byzantine emperor, while in the lands of modern Russia, they founded settlements that later gave rise to cities such as Kiev and Novgorod. It is no coincidence that Arab chroniclers, such as Ahmad ibn Fadlan, recounted with fascination their encounter with the Rus, tall, blonde men adorned with tattoos and practicing funerary rituals laden with symbolism, where a slave was sacrificed to accompany her master into the afterlife. These accounts reveal not only brutality, but also the deep mysticism that pervaded Viking life. Norse religion was a complex and poetic universe. The gods were not perfect. They were ambiguous figures with human desires and tragic destinies. Odin, the supreme god, sacrificed an eye for wisdom and spent his days roaming in disguise, in search of secrets. Thor, with his hammer Mjolnir, protected mortals from the forces of chaos. And Loki, the trickster, was both ally and adversary to the gods. The sagas, passed down orally by the skalds, the poets of the Viking Age, kept alive the deeds of warriors and navigators, blending reality with legend in narratives that continue to echo in television series, films, and books today. Yet Viking life extended beyond battles and mythology. In Scandinavian villages, society was organized in a relatively egalitarian fashion for its time. Women enjoyed considerable rights. They could divorce, inherit property, and even manage farms in the absence of their husbands. Some, like the Riku, legendary Lagertha, a warrior described in the chronicles of Saxo Grammaticus, are said to have fought alongside men, Although the existence of shield maidens remains debated among historians, recent archaeological discoveries, such as the Birka grave in Sweden, have revealed female skeletons interred with weapons and signs of military prestige, reinforcing the idea that the role of women in Viking society was more complex than once assumed. The Viking expansion was also one of commerce. They sailed as far as the Middle East, trading amber, furs, and slaves for silver, silk, and spices. Cities such as Hedeby and Jorvik, modern-day York, England, became vibrant urban centers, linking the Nordic world with the rest of Europe and Asia. The myth of the Viking as merely a warrior begins to crumble when one considers the traces left behind in these settlements. Bustling markets, jewelers' workshops, homes with sophisticated architecture and artifacts imported from distant regions. The Vikings were as adept in trade as they were with the sword, and their influence shaped roots that still affect European geopolitics today. Yet battles left a deep mark on their history. One of the most emblematic moments was the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066. There, King Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking warrior, faced the forces of the Anglo-Saxon King Harold Godwinson. The fight was brutal, and although the Vikings demonstrated a legendary resilience, with accounts of a lone warrior holding a bridge for hours, they were ultimately defeated. This battle is seen as the symbolic end of the Viking Age, although the Scandinavian presence persisted for many years across Europe. Only days later, Harold Godwinson would also fall at Hastings, before William the Conqueror, himself a descendant of Vikings. Even in defeat, Viking blood already flowed in the veins of Europe's new rulers. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Viking culture is how it blended life and death, the sacred and the profane, the historical and the legendary. The concept of Valhalla, the Hall of the Chosen Warriors, where eternal feasts awaited those who died honorably, captured this vision perfectly. Death was not an end, but a passage to a glorious existence. This belief bolstered their courage in battle, their willingness to explore the unknown, and their fascination with the supernatural. In burial rituals, they placed funeral ships laden with personal belongings, sacrificed animals, and magical symbols such as runes carved in stone. These runic inscriptions were not only records, but were believed to hold power, protecting the dead and linking them to the gods. The mysteries surrounding the Vikings are not confined to the past. Even in the 21st century, archaeologists continue to unearth intact tombs, artifacts shrouded in symbolism, and evidence of expeditions that were once only hinted at in the sagas. A striking example is the theory of a Viking arrival in North America. At Lonso Meadows in Canada, remains of a Norse settlement dating to around the year 1000 have been found, suggesting that Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, may have reached American shores nearly 500 years before Columbus. The Vikings called this territory Vinland, the land of wine. And though their presence was brief, the discovery reinforces the view that they were daring explorers, capable of crossing the Atlantic centuries before the great European navigations. Even in the realm of spirituality, the Vikings left indelible marks. Their shamanic practices, ancestral cults, and veneration of the natural elements echo the traditions of indigenous peoples across the world. Some scholars propose that the vulvas, priestesses, and seers played a role similar to that of Celtic druids or Siberian shamans, using chants, herbs, and symbols to access other realms of consciousness. The boundary between magic and religion was blurred, and even the gods could be invoked through complex rituals. In many communities, the vulvas were consulted before journeys, wars, or major decisions, and were both revered and feared. Their narratives belonged to a world where fate, the wired, was woven by invisible forces beyond human control. Finally, the transition of the Vikings from paganism to Christianity adds another fascinating element: the fusion of cultures. When kings such as Olaf Tryggvason and Olaf Haraldsson converted, Christianity began to spread throughout Scandinavia. Yet the Old Norse pantheon did not vanish overnight. Churches were built atop ancient pagan temples. Christian crosses began to appear adorned with serpentine and dragon motifs, and runes were adapted to inscribe biblical passages. It was not merely a spiritual conversion, but a symbolic one, where the new coexisted with the old. And in many cases, Norse Christianity preserved elements of paganism, creating a hybrid, enigmatic religiosity that defied the norms imposed by Rome. Viking history is, therefore, far more than pillaging and violence. It is a mirror reflecting our own complexity. Human beings driven by faith, ambition, love, fear, and curiosity. Every sword swung was a gesture of hope. Every saga recounted by the fireside was an attempt to defy oblivion. Every voyage, a quest for something greater, be it wealth, glory, or simply a place where their gods could listen. Today, when we gaze upon their runes, ruins, and records, we do not merely see warriors, but storytellers from a time when myth and reality walked side by side, and the sea was both a pathway and an abyss full of promise. Throughout this journey, amidst storms, swords, and forgotten gods, we have seen that the Vikings were not merely wild warriors emerging from the mist to sack defenseless villages. They were masters of the seas, architects of myths, and weavers of destinies. They crossed oceans, broke down borders, traded goods and cultures, and spread both fear and fascination wherever they went. Their stories, often distorted by their enemies, conceal a richness that goes beyond violence. They reveal a people deeply connected to nature, mysticism, and the value of honor. We have explored battlefields where steel clanged like thunder, and where death was but a gateway to Valhalla. We have witnessed how their beliefs forged a culture in which courage and destiny intertwined, where gods with human flaws influenced everyday life, and where poetry held the power to immortalize lives. We have seen the strength of their women, the diplomacy of their leaders, and the daring of their navigators. And we have discovered how, even in the face of Christianization, ancient symbols and rituals endured, transforming faith into a living tapestry, woven of the new sacred and the ancestral. Today, when we admire a rune carved in stone or watch a series about the Vikings, we are not merely looking at the past, we are recovering echoes of a mentality that valued risk, honor, spiritual connection, and the eternal desire to go beyond the horizon. The Vikings remind us that history is not made solely by the victors, but by those who dared to challenge the known world. And you? Do you believe that, within every ancient legend, there is a truth waiting to be rediscovered? Leave your thoughts in the comments, share your curiosities, and continue sailing with us through this ocean of mysteries. After all, the next legend may be about to awaken.